So I'm going to be showing you guys how to tie an Alphlexo crab. There are a few examples on the internet of how to tie these guys. However, I have discovered a few little tips and tricks that make them come out, I think, a little better, make it a little easier. These guys are not super simple. The material is a little bit difficult to work with, the flexible material that the body is made out of. This one is in a clear, is that color. This guy is what they call camo on the tubing there, and it's got a brown chenille. And here's another camo one tied on a little bit smaller hook. And this one is tan, also tied on a little bit smaller hook. First thing I'm going to do is show you how to make the eyes for your crab. And these guys are made with a little seed bead and some good old Zebco 30-pound Omniflex mono. I think I picked up 250 yards of this at Walmart for about $1.97, so that's a value deal there. One of the tools you're going to need for this is a bobbin threader. It's a regular old bobbin threader here. Sometimes this is I believe this is an embroidery needle, also courtesy of Walmart, and that helps sometimes thread the eyes through. It can be a little difficult at times, especially on the smaller ones. And to go ahead and get started, showing you the eyes, again, this is a 30-pound mono, and I've got some black seed beads. Now you can pick these guys up at Walmart or at the fly shop. I've also got some red ones. These are Killer Caddis brand. You can make some red eyes as well if you want. And I believe those guys are made out of glass. So to start off with, what I'm going to do is take a seed bead and thread it onto the end of the mono. And I'm going to leave about a 1/4 inch, somewhere between 3/16 and a 1/4 inch there sticking out. And I'm going to take a lighter and I like to hold the mono to the base of the flame there in the blue part, and I'm going to burn that back. It's going to form a little ball, and it's going to suck into the, boom, right there. You just saw it suck into the bead, and try to get it to go a little bit more in there. You might want to use your thumbnail or something to help straighten that out when it's still warm. This one's already cooling off on me. There we go. And kind of get that as straight as you can on the mono there. And then your mono is going to have a little bit of a color to it that is not going to match the rest of your bead. So what I like to do is just get a marker and just kind of color that mono a little bit. Then what we're going to do is take some Loon Flow fly finish and just coat that. And depending on how big you want your eye, this is the fine size. And if you want a little bigger eye, you can use the thin, it makes for a little bigger eye, or you can use multiple coats of this also. So there we have an eye, a crab eye. So I'm going to set that aside for now. So before you start, you might want to make yourself a couple of those. The hook that I'm going to be using to tie this guy on is a Gamakatsu SL12S, size 1/0. You can also use smaller ones. I tied some on a size 2 hook. It's a little harder, a little bit tougher to tie them on the smaller hooks. Go ahead and stick your hook in your vise. This fly is going to end up riding upside down in a sort of weedless configuration For the clear, I am using some GSP 100 thread, and I like to kind of spin it, cord it up a little bit, and put a base on there. This is a saltwater hook, obviously. This GSP, if you haven't worked with it before, it can be a little tough to cut. Kind of have to gnaw at it with your scissors. And go back to just about where the hook starts to bend. You don't even have to go back that far. And then I bring my thread up kind of to just about under where the hook point is. And be careful not to cut your thread on the hook point. And for this larger size, I use lead eyes, just plain lead dumbbell eyes. For the smaller size hook, for a size 2, use a medium. This is a large here. You go ahead and wrap those guys on. Just about midpoint, maybe just a hair back from midpoint on the hook. And get this pretty tight. This GSP gel spun thread is really strong. If you don't have gel spun, then I use like a 210 denier. Again, this is white. Got that on there pretty well. And then these flies, a lot of guys put a hot spot on them. For this, I'm going to be using some pink dumbbell eyes. Pink goes well with a white body or a clear body. I'm just going to be, again, cord my thread up. And tie this just forward of the lead eye. You kind of want these guys touching or almost touching. Do a few wraps around both. Bring it in closer. Make sure that they're fairly straight on your hook. Which I keep moving mine. Usually I put a few more strands of thread on here than I did on this one. I didn't want to bore you guys wrapping eyes on. Put a few more on there. What is really going to anchor these guys down is some super glue. But you want to get your thread on there, good amount of it, before you put your super glue on. Come on. Yeah, I know I kind of have a goofy way that I wrap these. I'll do the regular crisscross and then I go up, over, down, and across, and then up, over, and down again. But however you like to wrap these guys on is fine. And then make sure they're fairly straight up against each other, about in the middle. Throw a couple of whips on there. And go ahead and cut the thread right there. And I'm going to use some of this Z-Mat, basically a Zap-A-Gap with a brush. And I got too much of it on my lid and it's sticking. But put a healthy amount of that on there. Get those guys glued down good and firm. And you're going to want to let that go ahead and dry a little bit. And so this is the Alphlexo crab tubing that you use for the body. This is where I get it, Whitewater Outfitters. About the only place I could really find it. There's not a lot of it out there. Not something you're probably going to find in a local fly shop. So take this. Well, before we do that, let's get our thread back on the hook. Cord it up. And, ooh. And put it, this thread, this GSP is really slick. Not a lot of friction to it. And you're gonna have to gnaw through it with the scissors. Any other thread, good strong thread, would work as well. So there we go. Now we're going to want to take the body tubing and cut about 2 inches of it. What I like to do is melt 1/2 of it. Just kind of keeps it together a little bit more. And now for one of the tricks that I kind of discovered. So when you put this on, if you just kind of try to push it through, it can come apart on you. So what I do is kind of get the scissors in there, open it up, expand it to where you can just get it past the dumbbells, slide it back a little bit. Now here's where you really want to make sure your thread is corded up. It'll help bite into this stuff if it's corded up. Usually what I'll do is put a couple of wraps, get it semi-tight, and I will try to adjust this and slide that down a little bit to where I don't have too much of this stuff coming out the other side. About like that, somewhere between around 1/8 of an inch, and then pull this tight. Again, make sure it's corded up so it bites into this so it doesn't slip. Get that down nice and tight. Take several wraps. Several wraps on there. And then you're going to want to whip finish it. And this is where you have to know how to whip finish with your fingers, because you're not going to be able to reach it with a whip finishing tool. There's some videos on YouTube about how to do this if you have not done it. And of course I'm stuck. Pull that fairly tight. And at this point, I like to go ahead and put a little bit of super glue again with the brush on your thread. Now, what you want to be careful of here is you don't, at this point, want to get a lot of super glue up into the weave of your body material. Be pretty careful with that right now, because if you do, it's not going to expand the way you want it to, and you're going to have trouble putting your legs through if the body material is all clogged up with super glue. But I can put a little bit on there, then I'll flex this stuff a little bit, make sure that I'm not, in fact I kind of hold it like that, and let it so it's flexed out. So I don't want it drying all together to where those little fibers are touching each other. This clear stuff is probably the most flexible and probably the easiest to work with of the Alphlexo tubing. So give that a little bit to dry. And that's about right where I want it, right in that position. If it's not, you can still slide it a little bit back and forth. So now, the next step is we need to try to get rid of as much as possible of these little guys. Again, the clear stuff is probably the easiest to work with. Some of the other colors, the tan, the camo, the brown, is stiffer, and it's got some different properties. It's a little bit tougher to work with, so it doesn't tend to form as good of a crab shape either as what the clear does. So what I'm going to do is kind of trim up. You don't want to get so close that you're worried about cutting your thread, but I'm going to trim these guys up a little bit here. Now, this guy is a cautery tool. It's got a couple of AA batteries in there. You can get these on Amazon or some fly tying places. Whitewater has these, and you hold the button down. What you want to do is real carefully melt that tubing back to your thread wraps. And what you can reposition here to make it a little easier. Hopefully this is picking up what I'm doing. And you can brace your hand and use your thumb. If you have a magnifier, this might be where you might want to slide it down. If you don't put your super glue on before this, it's real easy to get too close to the thread, pop your thread, and the whole thing comes undone. A little piece of thread there. So you melt that back to your thread. And now what you're going to want to do, just to kind of hold all that in place, is attach some thread behind it, and we're going to put just a little bit. Again, we're going to spin our thread up. We're going to put a little thread bump. You know, my thread's fraying there a little bit. I'm going to pull it out and clean it up. A little bit of a thread bump right up behind that to keep it from sliding down. Again, this stuff does not have a lot of friction to it. Sometimes I'll go around the tag end. Oh, just caught that with the hook eye, or the hook point. Not good. And I'm going to put a couple of whips on there. Right there. You can just go ahead and put super glue on it before you cut it if you don't want to whip finish it. Let the super glue dry. I like to put at least a few whip finishes on there. The thread bump will just keep your the body from sliding down. And once again, we're going to hit that thread, And that's a lot of super glue there. With some super glue. I'm going to glue my hook to my vise. That was way too much super glue. Blot a little bit off there. So now comes the tricky part. And that is going to be forming the body there. One of the things that I neglected to say is one of the reasons that there's not a lot inside this fly, and you can see with this one actually has, if you look close, it's got a little bit of estus in there, some pearl colored estus, just to give it a little bit of something inside the fly. You don't want to put a lot. You cannot put any. A lot of people don't put any. Some people like a little bit of it in the fly to give it a little bit of body. But the key to this fly, from what I understand, I have not fished it. I started tying him for a friend of mine who was taking a trip to Belize for bonefish and permit. Anyway, the point of this fly and the tubing is so it sinks fast. You know, the water goes right through it. There's nothing really to trap air in there. Fly sinks to the bottom, get in action quick. Again, some people like to put something other than just these dumbbell eyes in there. The pink or the orange or the neon green are popular colors for putting inside these guys for a hot spot. But again, you can put a little bit of dubbing or some estes or something in there if you want, but I would not go too heavy on it. So this is the tough part of this fly. And one of the little trick that I found is, see if I can show this here. I will wrap, again, this thread is very, very slick. If you're not using this, you don't have to take quite as many wraps, but I put some wraps around my pinky there. And the reason for that is so I can pull on this thread without it slipping. So you got your thread anchor around your pinky finger. Push this. I'm going to try to tip this up here so you can see kind of what I'm doing. So you want to, again, I work this stuff a little bit, pinch it, pull it, separate it out a little bit so that you kind of get close to where you need to be. Pinch the thread in between your fingers, get a couple of wraps, pull it tight. Make sure we don't have too much there. Yeah, a little tiny bit of a ridge, but I think I can work with that. So, tighten that down. I'm going to throw some whip finishes on here to hold it, and then I'm going to get a little bit of glue on there. After I whip finish it, pull it fairly tight. And I'm going to cut that tag end off. Or gnaw it off. And once again, you're going to want to put just a little bit of super glue on there. You don't want it soaking up into the, that's too much, into the fibers. On either side here, really. Let's go real light on there. A little bit of frayed thread there. And what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to cut right here in front of my, about halfway down there. where I have it melted, and I'm going to just take my finger and separate those fibers out, because I'm going to trim them off. While that super glue is drying, I'm going to kind of work them, because I don't want any super glue that soaked up those fibers. I don't want that gluing these things together. Again, this clear stuff is easier to work with. If I was doing the real thick stuff, they're a lot harder to bend and a lot harder to trim up. A little bit of thread fuzz there that we'll get with the cartery tool. So, you might just grab a couple of these at a time, bend them back. We are going to melt these off with the cartery tool, but I do like to trim them up fairly close. Now, on the different colors of the body tubing that are harder to work with and thicker, it's going to be harder. These are much more flexible in the clear. It's going to be harder to do this. You might be bending back 1 or 2 fibers at a time and cutting these guys. I could do several at a time here, but I'm trying to be careful. And just bend them up and cut them right in front of that thread. Okay. And I got one stray one there. So now we're going to take our cartery tool. These, by the way, I got this one from Feathercraft, I think. Or no, maybe I got this one from Whitewater. But it was about 15 bucks, 16 bucks. Not too bad. If you're going to be tying many of these, probably an essential thing. I've done quite a few of this, and I think my batteries are starting to get low. Try to catch that little piece of thread fuzz. I really don't want to hit my tubing with this, because if I do, it's all going to come unraveled. Alright. Just about got the plastic tubing melted back. Okay, you always want to put your cap back on this, because the end of that tool is real fragile. They do sell replacements. Alright, so now the body's starting to take shape. I can work it a little bit, kind of pinch the edges here, pull it into place, and generally kind of get it into that flatter crab shape. Now this fly, because the weight's all on the bottom, is obviously going to ride like this, so keep that in mind, especially from this point on. So now we've got our eyes made. What we want to do is make our legs. So this is micro chenille. I'm going to cut in too many places here, but and we're going to have 3 sets of legs and a set of claws, as you can see on this guy. And some of these I started off on one of the videos. They suggested you put 2 legs in the back and the other leg in the front, and then the claws in front of that, but I found it works better. And the other video that I watched shows all 3 legs back here, and then just the claws and the eyes in front. So cut you a piece. I usually just go from bend to bend there. I got it straight, and you'll see when I thread it through, the bend kind of works in my favor. So the hardest one to do is the one that's going to go through closest to the hook shank. Now you got to remember, okay, this is upside down here. Sometimes I'll kind of push this because when this is done, it's going to be a little bit more flatter, and I'll show you a trick for getting it that way. But to just kind of see how things are going to land here, I'll pinch it, and then I'll go ahead and feed this through and try to get it over to the other side. And this leg is going to be, like I said, pretty close to the hook shank. On the smaller ones, you really need that needle to get that through. Sometimes it's a pain going around the dumbbell eyes. This one worked out okay. So, again, this is going to be, that's upside down. He's going to ride like that. So, I like for these legs to be just a little bit down. So there's one leg. And I'm going to cut a piece of chenille for the next leg. And we're going to thread that one through about halfway up. I got a little bit of a bend in my threader, which actually can be advantageous sometimes, trying to get around stuff. So again, if you want to pinch that, be careful not to poke yourself with the hook shank. Kind of get an idea of how your body's going to be when it's done. And if you thread these through and you don't like where they ended up, you know what, like I don't like that one, I want it a little further down, then you can just go ahead and pull them out. Probably would be a smart thing to do, would be to go ahead and melt the ends on this first, so that if you accidentally burn it too much or melt it too much, then you haven't wasted all this time. But nobody ever accused me of being a real smart guy. Alright. And this last set of legs is going to be on the back. Pretty close to, again, I'm going to kind of pinch this up so I can kind of see where it's going to be at. Be pretty close to the back. Come on. There we go. And I like it that these kind of angle back like that. So, time for a little bit of liquid refreshment. All right. So, those are my legs. Now, I'm going to make the claws. So to make the claws, I'm going to cut a little bit longer piece. Some people do these, they make the two claws together. I'll give myself plenty of material here and make one set at a time. So what you're going to do here, hopefully this is showing up, is get you a piece, what is that, 3-4 inches long, double it over, and then you're going to just tie an overhand knot in the end of it. That's why I leave my fingernails a little bit long. You can kind of slide that knot where you want it to be. Don't worry if it's too big. We're going to trim it up. Like so. And you can just leave it like that, trim it up, and we'll pull it through, and then we're going to end up securing that in with some fly finish. What some people do, and I sometimes do and sometimes don't, put another knot in this just down below. And that kind of acts as a stop inside the body. I usually put it, I would say, between 1/4 inch and 3/8 down from the first knot. Pull it tight. So that's going to be your claw. And that's going to be kind of like your stop knot. And then I don't need a whole lot of this. It doesn't need to be real long. I got to trim it up. But I want to make sure that I leave enough on there. You don't want, 3 inches of chenille inside your fly. But I'll leave that on there long enough so that I can pull it through, so I have something to grab onto. So just go ahead and stick this through anywhere. It's not important too much where you go in, but it's where you come out at is where your claw is going to be. So I go fairly close to the hook shank, maybe slightly on the bottom. Again, I'm going to press this down so I can see the shape. Feed that through. This part can be a little bit tricky too. A cat hair on there. Go ahead and you can kind of pinch this a little bit. You want to pull that knot, and it's not going to go. I missed it. Almost got it through there. If it doesn't go through, it slips loose before the knot. Move it a little bit closer to the knot. Come on. There we go. It's hung up. Okay, so now we got it through. Just kind of work that in and get your tool off. There we go, your threading tool. So now that's inside there, and I kind of got a stop knot, and that's about the right distance. I kind of like my crabs to have their claws up in the air a little bit, kind of in a defensive type position. But when we put the fly finish material on there, you can kind of position these however you want. I'm going to go ahead and make another leg. Go a little longer on this. This stuff isn't too expensive. Don't worry about wasting a few cents. It's easier to tie it if it's longer. In fact, this one here could have been a little bit longer. You just kind of position your knot about where your claw is going to be. And then, like I said, try to shoot for about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch below that for the next knot. My stop knot. Yeah, I did make this too short. Come on. And get it over that other knot. And you can kind of pinch that with your nail and move it up or down. Pull it tight. Again, you're going to want at least 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch hanging out to pull it through with your tool, your threading tool. You can cut this now or cut it later. You can always make them shorter, but you can't put it back. And we're going to go through somewhere on this side, and I'm going to aim for the opposite area here. Come on. Okay, I'm going to kind of pinch it shut so I can see how the final shape of the crab's going to be. And I'm going to show you a little trick for shaping this body too here in a minute. There we go. And sometimes it's a little tricky getting your threading tool off. Work it at least with this clear. You can kind of see what's going on inside there. Alright. That claw back where he belongs. And you'll notice I flipped the fly over now. So I can work with it here a little bit. So that's what we got. And reposition a couple of the legs. Alright. Now before I glue any of these in, I want to do a little work with my legs here, because if I mess one up, then I'm going to be pulling that one out and doing it again. So the back legs are kind of the shortest on a crab, so you go about 1/2 inch or so. Oop. They're just kind of like little paddle legs, so then these guys are going to be a little longer. Try to get them fairly even. So you can always cut more off. But you can't put it back. These guys probably just a little longer than that last set. Generally, I like to have the back 2 legs at somewhat of an angle facing back, and then this one either straight or even facing a little bit forward. So then the claws, you got a little hook claw there. I like to have them kind of like that, where they're facing up like he's in a defensive position. So, alright, before you secure them in, and take your lighter, and there's a trick to this. This stuff will melt really fast. It'll also catch on fire. So once again, I put it near the base of the blue part of the flame, and I get ready to blow on it. So a lot of times it will catch on fire. You just want to melt it. It'll give you a little point there, kind of a little nub on the end. Okay. Go a little more on that one. Okay. And we'll do the claws. If you're not careful, you can really melt this stuff more than you want to. I would practice with it before you do it on an actual crab. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this out of here to catch these other ones. Try to separate these so I don't catch one on fire. Or burn myself. And it's a little too close for comfort. And that one started to catch on fire. Short ones are the hard ones. Okay, I think we got them all. And put this guy back in the vise. It's starting to look like a crab. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and get my legs about where I want them. And I'm going to secure this in. What I use for this, for securing the legs and the claws, is some fine fly finish. This is Solar as Thin. And this stuff, when you put it on, it will tend to want to, when you hit it with a light, if you haven't used it before, you'll find out that it tends to want to pull in the direction where it's at. And since I like my legs facing down a little bit, I'll start off on the underside. A little glob right there. Kind of put it just up the body material from where it touches the leg. Let it soak in a little bit. Kind of position it where you want it. And hit it with the light. I've tried to pull one of these apart, and they're pretty strong. This fly finish makes for a pretty strong connection. And I'll probably go through, separate those legs a little bit later, and I will, come on. And I'll put a little bit on the other side as well. You can position those where you want them. Like how that, if you can see it on the video, but that hot spot glows. Yeah, video's not showing it. It really glows though when you hit it with the UV. Alright, so over to this guy. Again, just a little blob there. Let it soak down through the netting onto the leg. I forgot to, you want to pinch this as you, have that face back just a little bit. Pinch it as you set your cement on there, or your fly finish, because it kind of helps hold the body, hold the shape of the body. That's what it's going to show you. So the other legs here. Now, especially when it comes to the legs that are closer to the hook shank here. Pinch that down. I want that leg a little forward. And we're going to fire it up. Boom. One more left on this side. And usually I'll put it right kind of where the chenille leg meets the body material, and it'll soak down and kind of hold it where you want it. Again, this leg here I like either straight across or just going maybe a tiny bit forward even. Alright, so there's those legs. Now we're going to do the claws. I'm going to do the claws on top for the reason I said I like it. If I were to put the fly finish here, when I hit it with the light, it's going to shrink, I guess is what it does, and it's going to pull that claw down. And I like for my crabs to have their claws up in the air a little bit, like they're getting ready to fight. This one kind of already is. Okay, now I'm going to pinch that. Let it soak in a little more. And pinch that. Again, it helps hold the shape of your body material when it dries. Boom. And now for this side, kind of put that right over where the knot is. Let it soak in for a minute. Again, pinch it. Come on, soak in. There we go. Got a little more than I want right there. Use a paper towel to sop a little bit of that up. Okay. So, here's our claws and our legs. So now we're going to do the eyes. eyes that we made. What you want to do is I'll generally clip these off about a little 1/4 inch or 3/16, something like that. And then kind of fit them where I want them. If they poke all the way through the body, I can probably go shorter on that one. If they poke all the way through the body, then you can shorten them up. If you shorten them up too much, though, then you might find that it's hard to get them into place. So I kind of like these just inside and just above the leg. Lost my other eye. There it is. And you just poke it right through the body material. Try to make sure they're fairly even. How's that look? Not too bad. Alright. Push that in a little bit more. Sometimes you'll end up with one eye that's quite a bit bigger than the other. One of these eyes is a little bit bigger, but it's not enough to worry me. But you can try to match up your eyes. If you kind of put a glob of the thin on there and let it run down, kind of get your timing about right where it starts to soak into the body, and boom. Okay, now we'll do the other one. Let it run down the eye. Come on. Run down the eye. There we go. I forgot to pinch it last time, but pinch it and hit it with the light. All right. So now we got everything attached, and one of the little tricks here is, see how I pinch this, it gets a little more of that crab shape that I want and not so much an oval shape. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and take a little bit of this stuff, kind of right along the front here between the eyes, and I'll let that soak in a little bit. And once it soaks in, I'll pinch it and hit that with the light. And now that is going to help hold the shape of that material. Yep. And if you need to, you can do the same thing with the back. I don't think I need to on this one here, so. All right. So now you can be done if you want. Or what you can also do is you can take a marker and you can hit the legs with a Sharpie and put a little bit of barring on those legs. I got one up here somewhere, I thought, that had some barring on him. I can't find him right now. But you can bar the legs if you'd like. One of the things I do like to do is make my claws red. I just think it looks cool. And I'm sure the fish do too. So when you're doing this, take a piece of paper or something. It's easier if you're not trying to do it on camera, poking yourself with a hook. And hold that behind her. Take your red Sharpie and make those claws red. hold them up against that. You kind of have to get it from a few different angles. Again, it's a lot easier when you're not trying to film it. And finish up these guys. You don't have to do this. Some people do, some people don't. But if you want to make it maybe a little more realistic looking, give a little bit of color. So again, this guy is going to ride like this, and miss a little stripe right there. I use these Sharpies. There's some chart pack markers that a lot of guys use on flies. I believe it's CHARTPAK. I have one in brown, but I think I ordered the wrong color of brown. It wasn't exactly what I wanted. I don't have one in red yet, so I got these Sharpies at Walmart. So there's your crab. These legs are going to have a little bit of flex to them. So, and it's got a hot spot in there. And again, the deal with these guys is that they're going to sink fast. The other thing I've heard is that they actually feel like a crab when the fish picks it up. Your bonefish or your permit, whatever you're fishing for, when he picks that thing up, it feels kind of like a crab shell, and so they hang on to it. So I'll pose him for his picture here. So anyway, so there's the Alphlexo Crab in clear. Again, if you wanted to take a brown marker, and you could actually put a little modeling on the body if you want to. You could model the legs. Let me see here. Yeah, like this guy. He's got some red eyes and some markings on his legs. He's got, that's the camo color, and it's actually got some green bead chain. I'm going to try this again, see if I can, yeah, see the green showing up a little bit when I hit it with the UV. And I'm assuming that when the sun hits that to the fish that can see UV, that's what that's going to look like. Yeah, there we're getting the, and that's the pink one actually. And I've got some orange ones too. They light up. Yeah, you can't really see it through the plastic, but anyway, so Alphlexo Crab.